Today we are going to make vegan chitlins. Now, I don't think anybody, I could be way wrong on this, but I don't feel like anybody goes on a vegan diet and goes, or becomes a vegan and goes, I really miss chitlins. That's just my personal opinion. Because I don't think too many people that aren't vegans go, I really miss chitlins. My first experience with chitlins, my first and only experience with chitlins, was I came down to North Carolina to visit my then boyfriend, who was to become my husband. It was New Year's. And on New Year's, it's tradition to eat chitlins, black eyed peas, collard greens. Very traditional New Year's Day dinner. Now, where I came from in Pennsylvania, it was tradition to eat like pork and sauerkraut and mashed potatoes on New Year's. So this was something new for me, and I'd never had chitlins before, and I'd never had black eyed peas before. The thing of it is, my mother-in-law did not cook. She was a brilliant woman who chose in a very, very difficult time for black people, let alone black women. She chose a career as an educational pioneer. And if you have kids that have gone to Head Start, you have her to thank for it. And I was very fortunate to know her, but she did not cook. But God loved her. She felt obligated to make a meal for me and my now husband for New Year's Day, because I was going to be visiting for New Year's Eve and then staying over New Year's Day. And she felt like she should make a dinner for us, a traditional dinner. So the chitlins that I had were pre-cooked, nothing wrong with that. Just warmed up in a pan, no seasoning, no nothing. I'd never had them. I didn't know that I was getting them in a way that they weren't normally like prepared. I think normally they're kind of heavily seasoned or whatever. My husband was putting hot sauce on them and eating them, so I thought, okay, that's the way we eat them. So I put hot sauce on them and I ate them. But I didn't like them. And I respect the fact that she worked really hard to make them, because she was not a person who cooked. She never bothered. She was not one of those people who sat in the kitchen of her mom learning to cook. You know, she was out changing the world, really, while her mom and her mother-in-law took care of the kids. I didn't like them. I thought they tasted awful. And my dad, I remember my dad saying, when I got home and I told him about it, and I was like, I had chitlins for the first time, and he's like, they taste like they ought to be spelled with an S. And I'm like, yes, they do. That was my one and only experience with chitlins. Fast forward like 5 years. My feisty mother-in-law she's 75, decides she's going to get married again. Her new husband, who I still have contact with, the man who ultimately cared for her up until her death, he was an incredible cook. Actually, as far as I know, her late husband before this one, also was a very good cook. So her husband, her widower, he made chitlins, and I never tried them because my experience with them was so bad, but she loved them. And my husband would bring them home, and he didn't like chitlins either, but he would bring these home, and he would be like, oh, I brought home, we'll call him John. John made chitlins, and I brought some home. And he'd be very excited about them. So I was assuming that they were probably better. And so that brings us up to today. So one of the reasons that I seek out vegan dishes As many of you know, I am not a vegan. I'm a vegan when it comes to my makeup. We don't need makeup to survive. There's no reason to test it on animals or to take an animal's life for makeup. Food is a little bit different. And I know there's lots of people out there, oh, people survive as vegans all the time. Hey, to each his own. I'm not going to get into that discussion. I will seek out plant-based foods mostly for the reason that I'm allergic to eggs. So I might be looking for a food that would normally contain eggs and then how to make it without it. So I'll seek out plant-based recipes for that. Or I'll seek out plant-based recipes because I like the flavor profile of a food or a dish, but it has eggs in it, or I just don't want to eat the meat, or I don't want to eat all that fat, or I don't want to eat all that salt, or I like the flavor profile of this dish, but I'm not interested in consuming a pound of sausage, something like that. Chitlins kind of fascinate me because when I had them, the texture of them was kind of neat. It was not like tough like a steak. It wasn't super tender like chicken. It was kind of somewhere in between. It was like a good pork texture, I guess, but I just didn't like the taste. And I love the seasoning profile of a lot of the chitlin recipes that I have looked at online. My mother-in-law's husband also sent me how he makes chitlins. He also starts with the pre-cooked ones. We are going to make vegan chitlins, and I'm really excited about it. And I just, like I say, I don't know that anybody out there who is a vegan goes, I miss chitlins, or anybody that even eats meat goes, I miss chitlins. There might be. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to make vegan chitlins. And if that sounds like it's interesting to you, then stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, ja, let's just alles get faded. Yeah.
Okay, so I realize that there's people out there that are like, I don't even know what you mean by chitlins. Okay, the word is actually chitterlings. They are the intestine of a pig. And there's been lots of jokes about not eating them. People will say, I'm not eating anything that something's been pooping with. That is literally what has happened. In order to eat them, especially when they're raw, they have to be really, really well, which involves a lot of soaking, boiling, and snipping and cutting to get them down to the cleaned meat that they can be. And then they are usually boiled for a long time, maybe an hour or two, in some kind of, almost like a crab boil. There's lots of spices in there, and there's usually a little touch of vinegar in there. And then you might saute them further or serve them. Some people, like my father-in-law, he will deep fry them. So that's what the dish is. It's just something that I tried for the sake of mother-in-law, future mother-in-law at the time, but kind of wasn't willing to eat afterward just because, guess the way they were prepared. So how do you get that same texture without actually using chitlin? In order to get the chitlin, we are going to use dried bean curd roll. This is usually put into seasoned water and then boiled for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then it comes out, supposedly, I never tried this, it comes out similar to the texture of chitlins. So I'm going to start getting our seasonings in here. Okay, so here's what we are working with. We've got a sauce pot here. We've got about half of that package of the bean curd, and I am going to start with, so I know how much water we're going to have to put in this, so I'm basically putting in this isn't 2 teaspoons, it's about 2 tablespoons of garlic chopped, and I'm going to say that that's pretty close to a clove, an entire clove. Could be possibly closer to 2 cloves. I want to get our heat going. I'm gonna put in about half of that same spoon full of red chili flake, and we're gonna put our water in. Alright, because we want that water to get simmering. I gotta put in enough water to cover these. So the other seasonings that I have set up and getting ready to go here are my favorite Tony Chachere's. And the other thing that we're going to put in here is one whole jalapeno pepper, seeded, because I don't want all that heat. A half of a green bell pepper and one whole yellow onion. So we're going to put all that in there. And we'll bring that to a simmer. I have the other half of that pepper and another half of a yellow onion sliced up in here. And we're going to get to that in a minute. This, as you can see, is now coming up to a simmer. Here's my thought about this. You know, I didn't salt this water. I'm going to salt the water just a little bit. And there's one other thing I'm going to add. That's what happens when you really like fake nails. You can't actually do stuff with them. I'm putting in there about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I don't really want a whole bunch of salt. Plus, the Tony's is gonna impart quite a bit of salt when we get to that point. All right, so we've got a pretty decent simmer here. I'm gonna turn this down, and I'm gonna put our bean curd in. And I think what's gonna happen here is the bean curd is going to absorb all that flavor that it's cooking with. This is why I didn't. You can do the bean curd first, but this is why I didn't. Also, I want to put just maybe about 1.5 teaspoons of vinegar in there, because most chitlins are cooked with vinegar. And I have poked around at some vegan chitlin recipes, and none of them included the vinegar. They all include things like soy sauce and whatever, and I'm like, listen, I may not be an absolute expert on soul food, but I don't think soul food includes soy sauce. So, no, I wasn't going to do that. So, I got these bean curd in there. I think I'm going to need just a little bit more water. And there we go. Get them down in the water. Most of the recipes that I found for this, and I do like to check other recipes because I kind of have an idea of how I'm going to do it, but I like to kind of check it against other recipes and also check it against genuine recipes of the very thing that, you know, I'm trying to mimic, I guess. So there we go. We've got that in there. We've got about 1.5 pints of water in there just to cover it. I don't want to boil it in a big pot of water because I feel like if I do that, I'm going to lose a lot of flavor. And we're going to cover it. So what that's going to do is keep the water in, okay? I can imagine that if you were going to boil these, like some of the recipes call for, then yeah, you're going to need a lot more water. But we're not doing that. Let's talk about where chitlins came from. Some of you are ahead of me and you already know. Some of you probably have been able to surmise. Chitlins came from slave era days when slaves were left only scraps of animals to eat. So they cooked up whatever they had, quite often the offal, which would have been the internal organs of the pig, the liver, the kidneys, the stomach, and the intestines. But chitlins were more than just a food. In the era of Jim Crow, they were actually a code, so that black entertainers knew that any venues that were serving chitlins were safe venues for them to perform. Chitlins, things like chitlins, pig feet, and hog maw were designated in that era as slave food. And it was because the kind of food that you ate sort of represented your social status. Slaves had to sustain themselves on things like pig feet, which were otherwise called trotters. And actually, personally, I love pickled pig feet. The maw, which was the pig stomach. And when I was growing up, my grandma used to make something called hog maw, which she was able to get the pig stomach from the butcher shop. I'm not sure how much of this you can actually lay your hands on today, whether you can get an entire pig stomach. A lot of times they will only sell you half of one just for this purpose, which is stuffing it full of potatoes and cabbage and sausage and baking it in the oven and then slicing it down. It's similar to what you might know as haggis, but haggis actually is the offal of the rest of the animal shoved into a sheep's stomach and boiled. Hog maw is, these vegetables that are put into, and sausage that are put into the pig's stomach and then baked. Or they had or slaves had to eat the intestines. The richer people would eat the cuts of animals that were more like the leg, the breast, the loin, which is on the upper part of the back of a cow, or the pork loin, which is the top part of a pig, which is how the expression eating high on the hog came to represent doing well. But at the same time, it wasn't just Black Southerners who came to adopt chitlins as part of a legacy cuisine. Western African cultures eat every single part of an animal, every edible part of an animal. They do not believe in waste. So they perceive these parts of the pig as more than just scraps. They are a very important part of sustaining their diet. And these cooking techniques that have been used have been passed down to where chitlins are part of a lot of Southern cuisine, cooked regularly. The stores down here pack the freezers with cooked and uncooked chitlins, and they sell out. You better be there early. They sell out early around holidays, especially around New Year's, because it's a tradition down here to eat chitlins at New Year's. It's supposed to be very good luck to do that. So what are chitlins often served with? Normally they're served alongside collard greens. They're normally cooked in vinegar. So they are served alongside of collard greens, which are also cooked in a lot of heavy spice and vinegar. And they go very well together. And greens tend to be bitter. Mine aren't. I add sweet peppers to mine. I add sweet peppers to my collard greens. You know those sweet peppers that you find in the delis up in New Jersey? I add those to my collard green. Don't tell nobody. Lose my Southern card. Collard greens would be something that you would serve with chitlins. You would serve black-eyed peas with chitlins. Cornbread is often a side for this kind of thing. They kind of make a gravy when you cook them because they are very, very fatty. So yeah, you have that. And if you have cornbread, you can soak that right up. Pretty common. So there you have it. That is the history of chitlins. Now we're going to see how we do with our vegan chitlins. Okay, so these look a lot like chitlins. Like, not even kidding. Oh, and you know what? I thought they were going to be really fragile. They're not. So I just kind of mixed them up there in the peppers and onions. They literally look like something that I could put over rice and serve. I was going to saute those peppers and onions to go with them, but I think I'm just going to save those peppers and onions for something else. Because we going to try these. Let me plate them up. I mean, if you didn't know that was bean curd, you might think it was chitlins. Because it smells like chitlins. It looks like chitlins. We gonna taste it and see if it tastes like chitlins. Okay, guys, we have plated these chitlins. These faux chitlins. Somebody called them Vitlins. And we are gonna actually get my husband here to try it. And we'll see. He's gonna be the ultimate taste test because I'm telling you, I haven't eaten these in 15 years. All right, guys, we're gonna get him to taste it, but he won't be on camera.
What? Are you serious?
Don't you want to try it?
What is it again?
Chitlins?
Are you serious?
Don't you want to try it?
Why don't I want to try chitlins?
Because I made them.
Why? Have you tried it?
I haven't tried them yet.
You need a guinea pig.
I haven't had them in 15 years. You ate them like 2 years ago when John made them. Try them. All right, what do you think?
Not for me. Too spicy.
It is spicy, but as chitlins go,
Better than other stuff, but it's way too spicy.
better than regular chitlins. I think these actually turned out really good. Are they chitlins? Man, I don't really know. They do have the same texture and they've absorbed all the flavors. So yeah, they sure taste like them. Actually, I'm not mad at these. We made vegan chitlins. So I hope you had fun hanging out doing this. I'm going to put the recipe down there if you want to try it yourself. I hope wherever you are, you're having a great morning, a great afternoon, a great evening, and a great night. And as always, I'll see you in my next one. Bye, y'all.
Hey, let's just get faded. Yeah, hey.